Hey folks, I'm Maggie. I'm the founding community product manager for DataHub and here to walk you through results from our latest survey. Before we dig into that, I want to do a quick review of the DataHub community by the numbers. To date, we have 7,800 folks in our Slack community across 1,700 different organizations. On the open source project side of things, we have 388 amazing humans that have contributed back to that software and 7,800 GitHub stars. And in terms of DataHub adoption, we see 2,000 people running Quicksort every single month. And as far as we can tell, based off of our anonymized telemetry, we see DataHub running in right around 1,000 servers in production. So that means that there are 1,000 companies actively using DataHub in production. It blows my mind. So given all of that, if we think back to where we were 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 12 months ago at this point, the community has just exploded. There's so much activity and so much excitement. We want to make sure that we're paying attention to the health of the developer community and making a lot of space for you all to provide feedback and to tell us how we're doing. So if you are in our Slack, you have likely seen the survey that we sent out in May. We received 74 responses from this one. And basically what we were looking for is just kind of an overall pulse check on how things are going for developers within the community. So with the question of how satisfied are you with the overall experience, what we see is that, 75% of folks are satisfied, if not very satisfied. We have a few folks who are expressing some dissatisfaction, which, we can only expect that to be the case. But if we actually dig into the highlights of the open text feedback that we got, overall, and this is a feeling that I had, or kind of an observation that I had, but it's nice to see that folks also agree that the community is extremely friendly, extremely active, and very, very helpful. The Acryl Data team, so the company that I work for and the company that's backing the open source project, is very available to provide feedback and suggestions. There's a lot of high quality documentation, tutorials, and overall, the contribution experience is very positive, and some very robust feedback from the maintainers, meaning the Acryl Data team. Some areas where we can definitely improve are keeping up with the rapidly growing volume of troubleshooting questions. So folks that are coming in with very specific questions about their environment or their deployment, or just getting DataHub up and running. We also recognize that as things scale up, the Acryl Data team has some work to do to make sure that we're improving our lines of communication with the community and back to the Acryl team. And then there's also, just from like a practical standpoint, some areas of improvement for the kind of upgrade or deployment experience. The next question we asked was, how satisfied are you with the information on the DataHub doc site? Again, really excited to see that the vast majority of folks are satisfied. In terms of what we're doing well, the doc site is extremely extensive. There's a ton of information in there, and it's absolutely more than enough to help people get from 0 to MVP, or even through their kind of initial deployment. But some areas where we heard very distinct feedback in terms of where we can improve is making sure that we start to consider how do we support version documentation. Also starting to incorporate a lot of the FAQ that happens in the community. Let's just transfer that to the doc site so we can minimize the need to join Slack and ask questions there. Also a great appetite for in-depth integration guides. Also understanding and extending the metadata model. DataHub is fantastic because it's a very robust metadata model. So we should make sure that we're taking the time to document that well. And then also some suggestions on improving our Python development experience. The next question was around satisfaction with support provided to you from other folks in the community. This is where we start to see a little bit more of that neutral or kind of like dissatisfied response. But ultimately, I think the key takeaway here is that, again, we have an extremely supportive and helpful and kind community where people show up to help one another. Also, in general, the feedback that we got in the survey was that There's high quality and speedy support across time zones. So regardless of where you are in the world, we probably have someone online within the community or within the Acryl team who can help you out. And that's just also really amazing to see community members jumping in to help one another out. In terms of where we can start to think through some improvements is making sure that we're finding ways to encourage existing community members who have been successful with the project to jump in and help one another, really just kind of build that network effect of community support. And then again, kind of find those patterns of common questions or common areas of friction and start building out some improved docs to address them more holistically. We also asked, how satisfied are you with the responsiveness of the Acryl Data team to your questions and concerns? This is one that I'm keenly, of course, very interested in understanding how we can do this better. The reality is the Acryl Data team has pretty much stayed the same size over the past year on the engineering side. And the community has just exploded along the way. So quite frankly, we are having a tough time keeping up with kind of the volume of questions that are coming in, but we are doing our damnedest, I promise, to keep up. But I wasn't surprised, and I wasn't surprised to see this this kind of distribution of responses. It is just kind of a reality check that the Acryl team, we need to make sure that we're showing up and being very proactive and engaging with you all. So in terms of key highlights, the feedback that we got was actually kind of limited. We only received 7 kind of like open text responses here. But in general, folks are understanding that we're going through kind of a scaling phase and trying to figure out how to keep up with the huge influx of activity happening. But we are, when we are engaging, we are giving some great technical perspective and technical support and very concise solutions. But again, opportunities to improve. We've admittedly become less responsive over the past couple of months as we are going through a lot of these scaling challenges. The next question we asked was, how well do you feel the DataHub community fosters collaboration and knowledge sharing? Again, I'm very happy to see that folks are overwhelmingly pleased with how well we are fostering that environment. Of course, there's always ways that we could be a little bit more creative or more responsive here, but I think overall there's a very collaborative approach that people bring to the conversation. It's great to see that reflected in the responses as well. And then in terms of how likely folks are to recommend DataHub to a fellow developer, honestly, this is where we scored the highest. We had 50% of people say that they were very likely to recommend it, which is just outstanding. I think that's like a huge testament to, kind of the overall experience. Of course, there are always going to be areas where we can improve, but the fact that over half of the respondents said that they would recommend it to a developer, or that they were very likely to, I think is a great testament to the hard work that we collectively as a community have done. We also asked an open-ended question around kind of like the one thing that you love about the DataHub community. And this is where I started to kind of categorize this into a few different themes. So first and foremost, again, this shouldn't be a surprise by now. Folks really love how supportive and helpful the community is. There's just a really positive nature and willingness to help one another, and just a general enthusiasm about the open source project itself, but then also the data practitioner space as well. People are also very happy with the opportunities to collaborate, and that could be anything from talking best practices to actually contributing back to the project itself and getting wonderful feedback from the Acryl team. In terms of communication and documentation, it looks like the Acryl team is doing a great job here. A lot of folks are happy with the quality of documentation and troubleshooting support. So, just kind of showing up and engaging with those conversations to be successful with the project. And then last but not least, and again, this kind of comes back to the fact that we wanted to hear from folks in the survey. We did have a handful of folks kind of commend us for how receptive we are to feedback, and also to adopt and act on those. So, I genuinely appreciate everybody taking the time to give us thoughtful feedback, and it is of the utmost importance to me that we make sure that we incorporate that feedback into our day-to-day and help people feel like they are heard and seen. On the flip side, we asked people, what's the one thing you would improve about the DataHub community? And again, I broke this into a few different themes here. The Acryl team, we definitely do have some work to do to be more strategic about how we are engaging and consistently helping everybody feel kind of seen and heard, and that their contributions, either as a bug report or an issue within GitHub, or contribution as a PR, or just even a question within Slack, we want to make sure that we're showing up. So like I said, we definitely have some work to do here, and I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes about the steps that we're taking there. In terms, another side or another area for improvement for us is our documentation site. While a lot of folks had a lot of great things to say about it, the reality is we haven't covered all of the use cases. We haven't, there's definitely still some areas of improvement for it. So we definitely want to start to explore how we can support version documentation. That way, regardless of what version you're on in DataHub, you have a corresponding doc site to go along with that. And then some improved guides or resources around common use cases for either adopting DataHub, rolling it out, deploying it, getting your end users or your stakeholders involved as well. Last but not least, there was actually a ton of really great feedback here in terms of finding new and exciting ways for the community to come together. So, one way that we are, or one area of that was adding a little bit more variety in the types of events that we host. So that could be hackathons, in-person events, et cetera. And then also just finding more areas where we can bring in experts from the community who understand the space really well, either for DataHub or metadata management or data practitioner, all of the things. Let's just make sure that we're finding opportunities for us to come together and share our knowledge with one another. And that also sounds like we have a little bit of work to do to rethink our Slack channels and making sure that folks kind of know where to route their conversations, their topics. So that's a ton of really amazing feedback. So how are we going to act on this? If you've been to some of our town halls recently, you may have heard me talk about the DataHub Community Council. We have not officially rolled this out. The reason being is we actually wanted to take this survey and find some very concrete and actionable items for us to address with the council. So based off of this output, I'm going to start working with my DevRel team, so specifically working with Hagen, to start to do some outreach or find opportunities for us to find folks that are excited about addressing some of the areas of opportunity that I just reviewed. So kind of concretely what that means is that we will be looking for ways to engage folks in the community to help us kind of shore up our documentation, our tutorials, troubleshooting guides, et cetera. We also want to find ways to make it easier for folks in the community to lend support to one another. And then again, kind of coming back to this idea of more variety in our event types, we want to make sure that we have a variety of webinars, forums, panel discussions, and more. So more to come there. If you are interested in any of these areas or any of the problem spaces, you have ideas, would love to talk to you. It'd be fantastic. And then on the Acryl side of things, some actions that I'm personally committing to in response to this is making sure that in Q3, so starting in July, that we really kind of ramp up our transparency in feature roadmap and making sure that our roadmap is up to date, and also really lending some transparency into areas where folks can contribute to that. I think right now the way that we talk about our roadmap publicly is very much, what is the Acryl team doing? And I'd love for us to find ways to say, what is the community doing? And what are the kind of, what are the initiatives that are underway and how can you get involved? Separately, I am hiring a community manager and 2 additional DataHub community engineers. The reality is our team is very small right now, and there's a lot of activity and a lot of buzz going on, and we want to make sure that we can show up in a meaningful way for you folks. On the community manager side of things, it doesn't mean that I'm going to step away. It just means that I'm going to have someone who can be fully focused on building out and scaling our community while I kind of work on that combination of community and product management. The DataHub community engineers will come in and provide support with our existing team to make sure that we have a really meaningful and engaging presence within the community. The other thing is that I want to continue to collect this feedback, as we go and measure progress along the way. Last but not least, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who took the time to fill out the survey. It really truly is information that we're taking in to inform our near-term roadmap and our near-term strategy. And we are deeply, deeply, deeply committed to making sure that we can scale and support the community. There's a lot of folks in here, and so we're doing our best to make sure that we're spending our time wisely and allocating our efforts in the areas that they're going to be most effective. So thank you all so much. If you see another survey like this come out in the future, please know that your feedback is something that we take very seriously, and we really appreciate the time and energy that you put into it. I appreciate you all for your time and your attention, and I will see you all in Slack. Goodbye.